you all have spent in Britain, but this is a wonderful place where folks have always enchanted me by how self-effacing they can be. And I can tell you that I received all these syllabi from you over the past few weeks. So many of you will apologize. Oh, I'm sorry, this is half-baked. I'm sure this is not right. And these are just absolutely brilliant pieces of work that start off as your baseline. So I wanted to thank you for the hard work, the talent, and the energy and dedication that you've brought to that activity. What we will do in our time together is to continue to build upon the work that you've done. And I am here really simply to facilitate your expertise. I'm here to help you to engage with one another, to reflect, to share, and in that way leave here at the end of next week with an even more well-developed, more fully crafted syllabus plan, hopefully to implement within the next year, if not shortly thereafter. Does anybody have any questions about any of that before we get started? Okay, well, the title of the activity that we have had planned for our engagements has been Courage and the Curriculum. So I'm going to ask you to do something that folks often do. Just turn and talk. Talk to the person next to you, anybody, and just talk briefly about why would I have come up with the title for the last 3 years of Courage and the Curriculum. So chat at your table with anybody. It doesn't matter how many people chat at this point. Just chat with folks around, share ideas about Courage and the Curriculum. Why that?
And so you have to be courageous in order to say, this doesn't align with history, or have you considered this, and maybe to insert another point of view. And that takes work, because sometimes the system doesn't want you to do that. That's one.
Thank you, group. Let's come back together. Thank you. Thank you, group. Thank you. We're coming. All right, they're asking for 2 more minutes. We'll give you 1 more minute, okay? Can we compromise? Okay, 1 minute. One more minute, and then we'll come together. Go ahead. So I'm just.
It takes a break to say, you know some things. Teacher problems. Yes. And I'll just
coming back together. Thank you, group. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, group. Notice in terms of strategy, notice I'm not making eye contact when I'm making the declaration. Okay? Because it's not about putting anyone on the spot, judging. That's kind of, and of course, if you know the work of Kane and Kane, making connections, talking about instruction, talking about how the brain works, brain-based instruction, teaching fearlessly, but also teaching in a way which does not cause fear, then you recognize the theory behind the strategy. Okay? So my attempt always, I may fail, but my attempt always is to support you and to make you feel valued and listened to. Okay? And it's not on a superficial level. It's not about my being cute. I genuinely do want to hear what you say. Okay? And so for me, that's part of the courage of the curriculum. So we had some interesting, I had a little bit of interesting eavesdropping and being pulled aside while you were engaging with one another, while you were verbalizing your thinking. And so I'm going to ask you at this point, if maybe just a few people can share either what you said or what you heard. And I'd like to start with Edith, because you said something very interesting to me. I'd like to ask if you could share with the group. You can stand or sit, and just speak loudly, please, to the group, if everyone will stay engaged and give her our attention.
I told you that courage was a value, not an attitude. And I believe that to teach anti-Semitism, we need positive energy. That for me, the right word could be energy and the curriculum.
Ah, okay. So energy and courage.
Not a value, not a moral value.
Okay.
Courage is a moral value. But it's a question of attitude.
Okay.
More than of value.
Okay. All right.
The value are underneath the attitude, are behind. They are there. But what we can show to the students, what the transmission could be positive energy.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I offer another perspective? While I agree that courage is a value, but when you put courage in a context, it can change from value to attitude, because in different settings, in different geopolitical settings, to take a stand may be courageous, but also to take a stand may be, because it has to do something to contribute to the discipline as well.
So I will tell you, one of the things that I will attempt to do is to ensure that the curriculum that we have in terms of the work that we do together, not your syllabi, but the work that we do together when we have our sessions, our workshops. One of my goals is for the curriculum not to be a secret. So that is one of the reasons I announced that theoretically I'm coming from the framework of metacognition, brain-based instruction, constructivism. So the practice should resemble the statement. And we can, of course, have many engagements around theory, but I'm sure that many of you will know some of these things more than I do, based on where you come from in your own areas of expertise. My thinking is that iron sharpens iron, and of course that's not an original idea. Okay, so with that in mind, let's hear from just maybe one or two other people, either in terms of what you said or what you heard, with regard to the idea that we call encouraged in the curriculum. Anybody? And then we'll move on from there. So part of the fact that this, I'm saying that our time together will not be a secret, is that we're going to move somewhat quickly. Okay? So let's hear from a couple of people. Anybody, what you said or what you heard? Anything that stood out that you think would be for the good of the group?
Okay, we go as a group. We discussed the term courage with curriculum, like to be able to face nasty questions, for example, from students when you teach anti-Semitism, or maybe have courage to speak loudly, freely, neutral about these things that sometimes you are able to be influenced by your history, the relations, so have the courage to be neutral, for example.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anybody else? You might notice that I'm trying not to affirm necessarily the statements, but simply to honor them.
So I'd like to maybe echo something that was said before, not in this panel. And when we, at the first half of the day, had a discussion with Benny Morris about the jihad and about the need to dialogue, or should we avoid the dialogue with these people, I think this such kind of discussion, it will be a big courage to make it in a classroom today in many campuses. Whether it's because it will be very offensive for some students, so they will complain, or it will be unsocially accepted among the faculty members. So when we look for courage in curriculum, maybe we can speak about such kind of activities.
Sure, and within your own context, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for your district? What does it mean for your university, your students? Right? What does it mean for your students? I mean, courage for your students might be different from what it is for you. Maybe courage for the department chair or the president, right? Or your colleagues.
You know, I was thinking about when Charles has talked about the influence of outside funding on institutions, and I was thinking about, you know, a major university in Virginia that's received a lot of external funding, that certain conversations don't happen now because of that. And it comes together as the courage of the curriculum. Boy.
Yeah.
And the answer is there's no courage now.
Yeah. And I should tell you, I know one of the things that we've heard a bit about recently has been historicity, and we'll continue to talk about history, historicity, or different perspectives on the idea. That can be fine. Okay. So, the notion of historicity, right? When we're looking at the curriculum and the work that we've done, I would just like to invite you to know that what we're doing this year is influenced by what we've done over the previous years. We've listened to the participants before and adjusted to what they said. We want more of this. We would like less of this. We like this done a little bit differently. And before, as you leave today, I'll just leave space up for you to, if you have any thoughts about what you like more of, what you like less of, and what you would like done perhaps differently. Right? We'll leave that, but that'll be at the end. That'll be part of the exit ticket for our work today. So we're going to honor that and continue to grow, because the goal is for ISGAP to grow, for our work to grow, and for the work within the curriculum and around the curriculum to grow. And so what you say weighs in heavily in the work that we're going to do. With that in mind, I'd like to help you to see a little bit more perspective. So I'd like for you to have a sense of, this may be something you've seen before because you've been to the ISGAP website. but I'd like you to just have a sense of what that first class said and what they did. And notice at the end of this, this video clip, you'll see that they're standing up and talking about the curriculum that they have developed, the syllabi that each of them has developed, and what each of them plans to implement. This will be you next week, okay? So I want you to have a sense also of that. As we wrap up next week, we want to hear from you in terms of what you will, where you plan to be with regard to your curriculum. This will be a review, I'm sure, for most of you, but it'd still be nice to see.
Unfortunately, there are many people that I would talk to and say, look, you're being anti-Semitic. And they say, well, no, I'm not, I'm just being anti-Zionist. So I think there are certain words that are interchangeable and used to cover up things like anti-Semitism. And many people who actually are anti-Semitic don't actually realise that they're
making them aware through academic tools, through teaching at universities. This can contribute to fighting the end against the spreading of this phenomenon.
Charles did an amazing job bringing a lot of different academics together to study anti-Semitism, and it's a very diverse group.
So the objective of the Summer Institute here at Oxford has been, in a sense, to create critical anti-Semitism studies, or critical contemporary anti-Semitism studies. The contemporary study of anti-Semitism is really non-existent in the academy. There's the history of anti-Semitism, there's Holocaust studies, which are very important. And for the various reasons, the study of contemporary anti-Semitism has remained, I would argue, a taboo in the academy. And unlike contemporary forms of discrimination and racism, like racism in general, gender studies, queer studies, the study of contemporary anti-Semitism has remained outside the organized institutional frameworks of the university.
I think I would introduce perhaps the idea of ethnicity when you bring out race, if you haven't done so already, because that becomes a very good umbrella when dealing with missing Jewish identity.
I'm looking for an opportunity to refine curricula in teaching anti-Semitism that I've already begun to work on. My university doesn't currently offer programs to students specifically in anti-Semitism. They're related to our existing coursework on Judaic history, but I think it's a subject that needs to be studied on its own terms, and there's interest.
I'm trying to design a syllabus that I can use to teach graduate students in my department about anti-Semitism. I'm going to give a survey course for them that will address various anti-Semitic manifestations from the Greco-Roman antiquity through medieval Christendom and Islam. This is a great opportunity to develop the syllabus and to get to know, to help myself to understand the current situation of the Middle East and various ramifications regarding anti-Semitism.
The curriculum that Charles put together for us has been informative. With colleagues, first grade instructors, great speakers.
But please, this is really why I tell my students all the time, please don't let me finish what I'm doing, just raise your hand and stop me. I mean, seriously, I don't mean that we have that relationship, because it's going to help me in terms of my own pedagogy, because there are a whole bunch of things I have in the notes, a whole bunch of things I have here that I glossed over. It's a fantastic question.
Anti-Semitism has remained outside the organized institutional frameworks of the university. And the purpose of this program is to bring scholars from all over the world and help them to create courses on critical contemporary anti-Semitism studies, and to go back to their home university and create courses for credit in their home university.
And that report showed that in this period in 2002, the majority of anti-Semitic acts did have an Arab Muslim background. But then there was no follow-up in any other studies.
We take the people who are the most vocal, the people who are the most active, you'll find in universities right now, especially with regards to anti-Semitism, it's the triple threat. We've got the far right, the far left, we've got the far right, we've got Islamists in the middle, who are joining with different groups in different countries. And Carlton was talking about this earlier on. Last year there was a march where Islamists joined with the far right, the platform by which they actually marched with anti-Semitism.
This is going to be a course on modern European anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, and it's going to be taught on a 3,000 level. We have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. 3,000 level for practical reasons because I don't want to get a cut. To explore how racism and anti-Semitism have affected sports in the US and abroad.
The title that I gave to the course is The Making of Modern Anti-Semitism from Modern to Contemporary Articulations of the Longest Hatred.
So I'm interested in this. Logical internalization of anti-Semitism amongst Jewish young students on campuses.
Moving forward to begin to talk about, elevate the text, criticize the text, in many ways be better talking to it.
I'm going to talk about the genes of eyes, so that's the gene for a little bit. What constitutes a gene in my case is not the politics of academia. It is the things like time, quality of the students.
My goal really is to get the students to discover the anti-Semitism in the text. I think it's important for them to find motifs in the ways that Jews are talked about in the literary tradition.
Concerning the syllabus, I want to talk about dealing with the past to combat the anti-Semitism and hate speech.
Charles is really an amazing leader. He leads very much from the back. It's very
You want to proceed?
The past to combat the anti-Semitism and hate speech.
Charles is really an amazing leader. He leads very much from the back. He is very engaging. He's very respectful of ideas and perspectives that are contrary to his own. He is clearly, as most people who know him are well aware, he's very much a person, a man of deep conviction. He feels very strongly about his ideas.
He's managed to bring people from around the world, from different backgrounds, from different beliefs, to actually come together here in Oxford to actually try and build a syllabi that they can actually then go ahead and teach in their academic institutions. But on top of that, one of the things I'm really, really impressed by Charles with is his energy, his vigour, and the purpose that he's shown to really go through and break walls and obstacles. And the contribution that he's making, I think we will only really see the rewards for that as a society over the next 5-10 years.
We have 28 professors from 17 countries, people from all around the world, from various disciplines, who came to Oxford at Hartford College, where we had a very intensive training program. And I think it was a great success. The group of professors were really incredible, and it was really a very intense and creative moment, and I think it was a very special 2 weeks.
All right, thank you for that. I'd like to ask you to just think about the clip that you saw there and ask yourself, do you see yourself anywhere in there? I mean, did someone speak to your curriculum, speak to your issues, speak to concerns that you have? And I would also like to ask you to think about your own instruction. Remember earlier when I first wrote you with the memo, I asked you if you might reflect on your own pedagogical style. How do you reflect on your own instruction? And I knew it was kind of a curious question in some ways because, at least in my experience teaching at London University and teaching at Columbia, was that no one really asked me about my pedagogy. And so I want to ask you and see, maybe people are asking you, or maybe you're asking others. I'd like for you to just chat at your table again, or your environments, about your own philosophy, your own approach to pedagogy, and what will that mean for your implementation. Okay? So if you can just buzz.
Sorry about my phone. So I was most drawn to, I think, when you spoke about encouraging the students to find motifs in literature, where she was essentially giving them something to read, and she expected them to be able to identify the processes or the anti-Semitic language attitude to the text, and then have some kind of discussion, which is what I like to do. I like to carefully select text and give students an opportunity to and then rest it on. And then ask strategic questions to force them to that's the text I selected. So you don't decide what's next. By design. I like that, having them discover what it means to them. Okay, 6064. Not just right now. That's nice. And so sometimes having it so large, I think it's probably the best response. I think there's a place for even in a small group, and then take them in the talk to each other, or they can debate an idea or present an experimentation. I think it's critical for them to internalize it. Not memorize a subject like anti-Semitism. It's so hard sometimes for people to accept that this happens, that it's still happening, and that it's connected to some other issues of race and oppression. That I think we have to be really trying to internalize it. Because I think it's I want them to know they are different, but I hope they'll know that it's different, and they can make the world different. I hope Yeah, you have to do that. And then we teach or advanced some kind of then we say, because you're right, some students coming from either they're blindsided and they don't want to believe it, or they've been told that this did something terrible, this was but the teacher, so how do you change your mindset? I think it's just presenting ideas and having the rest of them fight with themselves. It's not easy or pleasant. You like to take your class.
All this while, very positive,
I feel the same way about you. Thank you. I need to. Isn't it wonderful? There's something about it that I do something new every time. I prove something to myself and my students every time. Like there's always something. It's never boring. Never boring. Never the same thing.
That's an important argument of the not very good, but it's straightforward and according to argument of government, which is of course the force behind anti-migration, no, they are federal.
They are some right who feel like they're here. If I get to you, I'll get to you. But that's not really helping change.
I know you study words. For instance, there are
Oh, that's great. Yeah. It's changed. They want to do more. They're going to try to get it. Right? They took a risk. And you say, hey, that's right. I like that. Do you find that there are students in your class who go to another class and say, never ask me what I mean, never did, I mean, you know, I did a lot. Yeah. And how many are there many
All right, thank you. Let's come back together. Okay. Process. Thank you, group. Thank you. We're coming back together.
Thank you. Thank you, group. Thank you. Thank you, group. Group process. Thank you, group. Okay, great. Well, one of the things that, first of all, thank you for that. Genuinely, thank you for that. But one of the things that I hope that we do in our time together is that we engage as co-developers of the curriculum, which is a novel idea for some people. I think that was kind of what was interesting and something that Femi said yesterday. You know, how it was shocking and golden for some folks to see him engaging with students doing real, quote unquote, real work, a la, you know, John Dewey and others, right? This idea of real life applications of the work. So it's just interesting. So one of the things I would like to do is just continue to encourage you to be co-developers of the curriculum. So what we do next time that we meet may be influenced by what you say you would want, or what you feel that you need. That's one of the reasons I'm going to ask you very much to think seriously before leaving in terms of what you feel that you need in order to be successful with what you want to do, or to feel more fulfilled with what you want to do as you return with your work. That connects, of course, to what you just did as well. That must connect in some way, I should think, with your own philosophy. Who are you as an educator? Why are you as an educator? Is there a blurred line between activist, advocate, and educator? Or are you an educator, activist, scholar? Right? So I'd like for you to continue to think about who you are as an educator, who you will be as an educator. And at the same time, I'd like to kind of contextualize that in terms of your own experience. So after we hear from you, again, I'm going to ask you to wrap your life around what you just said. That is, after we hear a few people report out from what you've said and what you've heard, I'm going to ask you one of my favorite prompts, which I've asked educators for about 20 years, and Stephanie's already heard this prompt because we worked in a similar company, the same company for many years. Wrap this idea around what you've just said in terms of your philosophy. Who, in your estimation, was, I used to say, your best teacher and your worst teacher. I'd say, like, what was your best teaching experience? The best, from the learner perspective, who was your best teacher, your worst teacher? And then they had all kinds of engagement in the professional development companies I worked with around the country, and people came back with other ideas. They say, well, maybe we should talk about who's your most effective teacher, right? But then I had a really great colleague who said, every teacher is effective. Every teacher is 100% effective. Yeah, I think so. Anybody agree with me on that? Yeah. What?
I agree.
Great. I agree. Oh, you agree? And why is that?
Because they're effective poorly or
yeah. They're very good at being effective. Right. They're effectively good or effective.
In some form, you always have.
Oh yeah. You're doing exactly what you want to do.
To show you exactly what not to be.
Yeah.
I used to have a professor when we would do an exercise, and he said, "Oh, you have helped us today." That really meant you have destroyed, and this is the way I can teach you how to do it better. It was frightening, because every time you say you've helped us, everybody says, "Oh, here it is."
Okay, so let's, if we could share a little bit more in an informal way, if you might, before we get to the highly effective teachers, let's hear from you in terms of your philosophy. Anybody would anyone like to share either something that you said or something that you heard from your environment? Something that struck you that might be useful for the edification of the group.
Something that seems to be a recurring theme between my wonderful partner and I is this notion of being student-centered. How a great deal of learning comes from giving students an opportunity to demonstrate what they understand, and how that's a risk that you take by empowering students, but you learn so much about what they know, what their misconceptions may be, what their successes are, as a result of just letting them try.
Yeah, there's a story I heard, and, oh, by the way, there's a happy ending, as you can tell. I hope there's a happy ending. There's a happy middle, at least, to my life, right? I hope there's a happy ending. There's a happy middle, right? In terms of, because I told you about my having been born into a situation which had me materially poor, but spiritually enormously rich, right? I believe I've been able to hold on to the spiritual wealth, and I hope to continue. Fortunately, when I was about 17, I was able to have the material wealth as well. My parents were able to sell that plot of land. They had no water, right? No running water, well, sometimes no electricity, right? And we're able to sell that land to the government under a special program of urban renewal in the United States, and move to the previously part of town, the part where my grandfather couldn't go to swim. He was born in 1899, 9999. He used to say he was born at 9 in the morning too, but I don't know about that part. But he could not go and swim. And this is the elite part of Gary, Indiana, Miller Beach. And we had a beautiful property, which I'm in the process of helping to sell now, because we're all gone. And my life changed in that environment. Do you know that I went from being a C student to being a B student to becoming an A student in 1 year? Because I had educators who believed in me. But I also, it had something to do with ethnicity. Downtown Gary had I would say no white students. And we were all pretty much on public assistance. We were mostly 80% poor. Aged family with dependent children, right? And there was one Latino in my class. And I used to say, why does Jose spell his name with a J? That was before I fell in love with Spanish, right? No white students. We moved to the white part of Gary. And I had a great sense of cultural pride. My parents always told me I meant something. So I said, these kids are not going to show me up. So, whereas in Midtown Gary, I was quite happy throwing the spitballs in the classroom. I was a class clown. Somewhat, sometimes. I got very serious because I said, I have to do this for the race. I didn't know about the social construction of race. I thought there was a biological fixity. But I was like, I have to do this for the race. I have to be a good ambassador. And so, I learned to code switch because I spoke the equivalent of Yiddish until then. African American vernacular English, that's all I knew. And I learned to code switch. So what I'm saying is, what I'm operating in now is a foreign language. All of that empowered me, and I attempt to bring all of that to my pedagogy. So there is a very happy ending. And therefore I ended up going to an Ivy League school, to Columbia, and then from there to here. So I bring all of that with me. All of that context is with me in my classroom. So I'd like to ask you to talk about your philosophy. Anybody, if you can share just what you said or what you heard from your table or your surrounding. Anybody? Yes.
Well, my friend and I were talking about the issue that it can be difficult to introduce a curriculum in anti-Semitism studies. It's a daunting name. It's a frightening concept. It may not sound like a sexy subject, of course we want to make. How to overcome all that? And so one debate is whether one should think only of a self-contained new discipline of anti-Semitism studies, which is one way to go. And another is to find different points where it can be incorporated, whether in history departments, philosophy departments, human relations, tolerance studies, and others. And a few practical points, I think. One, you were saying about us having to be, or one needing to be very motivated, inspired, idealistic, talented. In a way, yes, if you're going to introduce something marginal, controversial, and new, because it's not yet accepted. And there's certainly no guarantee that students taking this course are going to have something from it in their own eyes before they take it. So it has to, a lot of work has to go into making it succeed. And the question of whether it needs to stand on its own or be incorporated might not have one answer. It will depend on the local, national situation. And having said that, there's a need for standard materials, a textbook on Introduction to Anti-Semitism Studies that would be the first attempt. It wouldn't be perfect, it would change every few years, but that would show the intellectual depth, the breadth, the diversity, and that it's a serious subject, that it isn't just a couple of activists fighting their opponents.
So there might be the idea of a canon, right? I'm asking you because I'm not saying that there should be, but you might think and weigh whether you believe that there ought to be some kind of canon. I mean, what must we teach? What must we have on the curriculum? Is there something which is indispensable? Perhaps not. But it'd be interesting to hear you engage that idea as well as you think about it. I'd like to hear from you in terms of whether you think that there ought to be or not. Let's hear from a couple other people in terms of your own philosophy, what you thought.
That's a really great idea, by the way, some kind of book that none of us really are working from at this point. But in our table, we talked more about not what we teach, but how we teach and how to reach our students. And it was quite interesting because one of us began with the, what did you say, word? Drip by drip or data, that, you know, just spitting data at them. You lose them from the very beginning. And that began a conversation about, okay, so how do you grab them and how do you get them? And we talked a little bit about perhaps experiencing how they experience anti-Semitism, or someone else said hate, would be a good way to grab them. And then one of our other colleagues talked about the difference in Germany, where students don't have the expectation the way they do in American colleges that you have to sell yourself, that the relationship between student and professor is different, and therefore you might approach the subject differently, where you don't necessarily have to sell yourself. You can just maybe perhaps give them the material and they will swallow it. So it was interesting to see differences across countries in the way students think of their professors.
Yeah, the cross-cultural piece is nice. Michael?
I think that the curriculum should include something in psychology. Excuse me if I go back to the...
Says a psychologist.
No, but let me clarify why. I don't come from the political arena. And my teaching will contribute for sure to a certain group of people in any place of the world. So if I need to teach politics related to anti-Semitism, I will call the expert. Okay, but the curriculum, the syllabi I built, is focusing how to change beliefs, how to change our brain wiring in order to elicit dialogue, in order to solve problems. And I think that will be more difficult if we try to solve the whole world according to anti-Semitism. It will be easier if we start with small groups. And also we need to make the experience, and we need statistics to see which method is better. So that's why this is my point.
All right, thank you. And I take seriously, I don't want to shy you. I know that you're objective in your
one more thing. Perhaps we have more sessions where emotions will be touched or will be immersed and will be superficial. You know, like the film the other day. I think that the film was very important and triggered many emotions. So we need somebody, or we need something in the program to manage these emotions and take them as a material to study also.
Yeah. So you're tapping into the affective aspect of learning as well. Great. Anybody else? One or two last one.
I would wonder about this, and I don't know much about it, but there are many courses right now on the studies of racism, right, and prejudice. And so one approach is to start thinking about what do we learn from those? I don't know if you know about them.
Yes, yeah.
I would imagine you do. I mean, I imagine.
Well, when I was here, my research is on affirmative action, Britain, race and education in the United States, and Britain, looking at bricks in South London and Harlem. And when I gave my first talk in ISGAP, Charles and I were explaining who we were, and one of the things that we talked about was just what some of you are saying, is that people research things which matter to them, that they have a connection to, they have a history with, an emotional connection. You know, I started off doing PPE here, politics, philosophy, and economics, and I said, this isn't doing it enough for me because it was too structured. I needed to go deeper into something that really mattered to me if I were going to stay here. And so I designed a problem that was worth my research. So I told the group, yeah, I did research on affirmative action. It wasn't just because this was like, you know, the first thing in the dictionary.
But so what I'm saying is, I guess the very, very old pedagogical dichotomy is, what is the comparison and what are the contrasts? You know, how are we similar to those courses and how are we different? And I asked this question in complete ignorance. It's because I'm really curious to understand it.
Well, there's a lot to be learned from critical race studies, from a wide variety of things. People talk about social construction of race.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
From my experience, I will say something that during the teaching process, we can meet some problems, some contradictory reaction of students too, because it's a psychologically issue to teaching anti-Semitism issue, I think. Because during my study in France, for example, during professor when Jew-Israeli-Palestinian conflict, for example, it arrived and it, how I can explain, causes some bad reaction, some emotional reaction, for example, different people, different culture, different countries. That's why when we bring some literature, lectures, for example, and with some bibliographies, for example. But some people and from our countries, our own countries, can bring some different and in either side lectures and literatures from different, for example, anti-Semitic information, anti-Semitic prejudice, for example. That's why I think it's really, this issue requires high level of pedagogic capacities, competencies.
Yeah, you know, there is a quote which I detest, which is, how's that to start, right? Which goes something like this, and I don't know whether this is just something I've heard on the stage or whether it's more global, you can tell me. Those who can do, and those who cannot teach. And that almost feels to me...
There's a third piece to that.
And what is that?
Those who can't teach gym.
Well,
never heard that.
Yeah. So, to resist it all and defend the gym teacher, I will say that educator, what I say, and it's not novel, but wherever I go and I have an audience, as you know, I've never seen a microphone I didn't like, I tend to say that educators are part of a profession which make all other professions possible. We are the only profession which makes all other professions possible. And so with that in mind, also, so let's have a final bit of unstructured discussion. We'll have one structured one afterwards, and then we'll be on our way. So this will be our last unstructured conversation. I'm going to ask you if you will wrap your life around your philosophy. If you'll now talk about that highly effective teacher or two, or educator or professor that you had, or that you have. The most effective, you know, you can speak negatively or positively in terms of effectiveness. Okay? On to class. What are the characteristics? Maybe I explain why. You know.
The most effective I have now. Our students in here, they publish with me that if you let me, I can help you have so much to offer. So they already couldn't believe me. Students do some education, and then they share with me what they do. And say now take what you know, and what you know, something brilliant, and they believe in it. So that's for me, the conviction by student-centered comes from teachers that have me and my colleagues enough to say, oh, you have something in you, take this, now make something happen. I just think it works. So I like graduate teachers who have worked and said, I know you can do it. I'm going to give you some information, you take it and make something happen. Also had teachers who said, a science teacher in 7th grade who said, you'll never get it, you never will. You don't understand it, you never can't, because you're a girl, black girl, you don't know science. So, throughout my life around student-centered education, because I've had teachers who said, you can't do anything, and I've had teachers who said, you can do anything. And I know that I feel the no more denial. Was it meant? Yes. I love it. I love it. Right. Because I think they know they're being authentic and they resist that notion that I know everything. Because they know there's no way in the world, like, you know, and if we just invite them to teach us something. There's a proverb, in African proverbs, maybe in English proverb, but it's the teacher also learns. I'll have to find where, but I think it's the same spirit. Yes. If you are teaching, you are always learning. Yes. Yeah. And there is also It's them. Oh, I love that. I don't have it for the rest of my life. I think it's important. If you ever come to Nashville, Tennessee, that would be wonderful. I have a question. Oh, about gender. Yes, gender.
All right, thank you, group. Thank you, everyone. Let's come back together. Let's have a group process, please. Thank you. Thank you, group. Thank you. Group process, thank you, group. We're all coming back together. Thank you, group. Thank you. Thank you, group. Thank you, group. And again, I call this strategy thanking them today. Yeah, so thank you. Now, so thank you for sharing that. Let's hear just, these kinds of stories can go on for a long time, right? So let's mix these up more when we break. But is there one that we absolutely must hear now from a table? Someone would like to report that either something you said here, like this, and the whole group has to hear this one.
We have one here.
We have one? Okay, let's hear that. Thank you.
Okay, I will. This is actually a very personal story, and I don't know why I shared it with the group, and then I'm sharing it with you. This is about the power of being a teacher. I'm a scholar. Well, I will be a scholar soon, but I'm an academic. I have a PhD in Holocaust studies, and I work, luckily, I work in the Jewish Circle in Warsaw. But I think I had, for my age, a relatively good place academically, and I think it's developing very nicely. I wasn't very interested in that topic. This wasn't my undergraduate degree. I did my undergraduate degree in drama, and when I was in my final year of my undergraduate degree, I broke up. Well, I was dumped by my boyfriend then, and he was a year below me, and I decided to stay for another year. This is crazy. For another year at university, I was just finishing my year, because I had to be at the same place as he was to make him love me again, or potentially make sure he doesn't go out with anyone else. And so I went to this is again insane, I looked at the history of my website, and I looked at there's a Holocaust Research Center in Norway, and I looked up the list of teachers. The person on top was David Cesarani, who's no longer with us, and I had no idea who he was. I had no idea how famous he already was at that point. And I went up to him, and this sounds incredible, but I went up to him and said, I don't have an MA, I'm finishing my BA in drama, but I got dumped, and I really have to stay at this university. You have to take me on, and you have to teach me, and I'll be doing my PhD in Holocaust Studies. Because I'm Polish, I speak Polish, I can do Holocaust Studies. Wow. And he did. He did, and I got my PhD with him. And yes, so he's no longer with us, but he was the best teacher I ever had.
Wow, thank you.
The boyfriend.
What happened to the boyfriend?
Right.
He's reading her books now.
He's not doing so well.
She says with a smile. No, thank you, Catherine. That's excellent. That's wonderful. Okay. So thank you. So again, a lot of times I'll be sharing with you certain strategies, and again, you may take them or leave them. I don't know if you might remember, the handbook of Epictetus, when he said, treat life like a banquet, right? And so you don't have to go rushing after something and take it. If it comes by and you like it, you just take it. If you don't, that's kind of how I approach our strategies. If it passes by you, you like it, use it. If not, let it go by. Okay. So there's one structure. We've done a lot of unstructured work, sometimes called turn and talk, right? This is a great way for someone who's writing a lecture to engage the whole group. Because there is interesting literature about how to teach based on timing. We completely obliterate that at the university level. We talk and then we have a break 3 hours later, right? But at the K-12 level, certainly a lot of educators they chunk the work, right? That's what a lot of folks like Eric Jensen, Teaching with the Brain in Mind, will say, that you chunk it. And there's a formula that some have argued is useful. They say the age of the child in minutes, plus or minus 2, is about the time the child can focus on what you're teaching. Now, as educators, as adults, we don't have to frame it in terms of our age, but maybe it is, 60. Well, longer. But we tend to engage and focus, but the brain does shut down sometimes. We drift off. But because if the educator doesn't bring the brain down, the brain brings itself down. You find yourself wandering out the window or doodling, and then you come back in, right? So there's some interesting things about timing. So I would ask you, however you teach, again, it's not about changing you, but however you teach, you might want to consider that. How do I chunk the time when I have people listen to me, or when I have them engaged in a particular activity. So I mentioned that because one way you might decide to break up a lecture is to have a quick turn and talk in the middle of it. Say you talk for 45 minutes, and because everybody has something to say, often they just need to get it off their chest, right? So just let them, so also in the middle of it, okay, let's just have a quick turn and talk. It'll seem weird to them at first, but then they're like, oh, that's the professor who does the turn and talk. And so then you just let them make meaning, right? Which helps it to go into long-term memory. And then to continue.
So they do that with each other?
Yes, turn and talk. And that's, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's a way of removing some of the hierarchy in that moment. It's just like, you have a thought, share it. And they don't have to report out to you, just keep going. Just like I didn't have you all report out on this, because I would have just slowed us down, right? We'd be here forever, great stories, we can have them over tea and as we spend the next week and a half together, right? So that's just something to think about. Something like a quick turn and talk in the middle of a lecture or even a seminar might be useful. You might get a really great pay dirt that you weren't anticipating. So, so there's one structure one. So we end where we began, and one of my greatest, my most effective in a positive way educators is someone who is still around, whose name is Augusta Mann, and she always used to tell me. And she also told Steph, if your session ends where it began, it's probably a good session. So I feel good about that because we're ending where we began. You'll notice that when you came in, I had color-coded sheets just to kind of let you know this was more or less the dyad that you'll be working with, want you to work in twos. So I'd like to ask you to work in twos briefly. Or just over something that we call, is a more formal way of approaching it's a more structured way of approaching a turn and talk. Basically, it's something that we call think aloud problem solving, TAPS. There are many different protocols for this, but this is a very simple one. You just put and so once you've taught it, you don't have to reteach it. So if the front part is just explaining it and having them get it. But then if this becomes a part of your curriculum, you say, okay, we're going to do quick taps, and everybody will know what you're doing. And it's going to be a quick activity. You can be in and out of it in 10 minutes. Right? So taps. Think about problem solving. It's very simple. You have a speaker and a listener. So one of you can just decide who's the speaker and who's the listener. So you want to grab a partner quickly and decide who's the speaker and who's the listener. Okay. All right. So now that you've decided that, and don't worry, you both get a chance to play the roles. Once you decide in this moment who's going to be the speaker, let me just tell you what the speaker does. The speaker solves a problem. I'm going to present to you very shortly a problem. You solve the problem. Okay? So you solve the problem and you verbalize your thinking. The important thing is for you to continue to tell your listener how you're solving the problem. 2x minus 12 equals, so I'm solving for x, and so that means I'm going to take the negative to the positive. I'm going to remember my order of operations, right? So that's how you solve. You're verbalizing it. You're not just doing it. You're helping your listener to understand how you think, how you problem solve. And often one clarifies one's own thinking when doing that. So you solve the problem and you don't accept help. You don't ask for help and you don't accept it in the solving of the problem. The listener takes notes, listens carefully, and does not solve the problem. So the listener, you just kind of take notes on anything that helps you to remember or that you think is interesting, right? And in terms of how this person is solving the problem. You listen carefully and you do something which is very, very difficult, especially for highly academic people. You just listen, you zip it. You don't solve the problem. you can't say, but what you think about, or maybe if you know, my best way of doing it, no, you just back off, even if the person is, in your view, erroneous, or making a mistake, or unclear, or is saying something that you disagree with, or maybe even if you agree with it, you're almost a stenographer. Just take notes, okay? And then I'll walk you through how we debrief that, okay? So, and then we'll do a quick turnaround and we'll be out. So, we have our speakers and listeners? Yes. Okay, and both of you may use your pencil and paper, but if you're the speaker, just tell me. Okay, so here's the problem. Here's the problem. All right, and so again, our speakers, let's have a group process. So our speaker is solving the problem. Explain what text is. T-E-X-T. Text. What does that mean to you? Tell your listener, what is text? What is text? Let's do this for 1 minute. Text. What is text?
But no, you're in touch with her.
I took their Okay, let's stop there. Thank you, everyone. Don't worry about explicating it to the finish. That's fine. Just wherever you are, you can just stop. Okay? Sometimes it's not being completed. Right? So now, we just like for one or two of the listeners to tell us who your speaker was and what your speaker said. Anyone who had something that was really interesting. Now, however, in order to do this, we are co-developers of the curriculum, and we want to honor people's voices. So you must get permission from your speaker to share. So just check in with your and feel free to decline speakers. Right? We only need one or two. So if there are any speaker who says, "Yeah, you can share mine." Okay. We have people with permission. Okay. So now let's hear from a couple of. Okay. So let's just hear from a couple of examples. Okay. Group process. Okay. Group process. Let's come together, group. Thank you. Thank you, group. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, group. Thank you. Great. All right, so let's hear. Who are a couple of, okay, so let's tell us who your speaker was and what your speaker had to say.
Okay, I'm speaking.
And we're not evaluating it, we're just sharing it, okay?
Okay, I'm speaking with Seth's permission. So he's a historian and he's shared the understanding of the text it's important because a subject is presented to the students. It's a text, the text is something a teacher and a student shares in common. It's also a link to a historical subject, and it makes it relevant within the context, and most importantly, I think, it said things that the subject and the way we access the subject, the text narrates that.
Great, thank you. We had a couple other people I think I saw here, and was there someone else? Okay, yes, here, thank you. So let's hear, we're hearing from the listener, who with permission is sharing out.
Daniel was the speaker in our group, and according to him, trying to understand text is to understand an assembly of communication or a block of communication in a language. It can be lengthy or short. It can be just a couple of sentences or longer than that. It is something that is understood by some or all, not necessarily always by all, but generally comprehensible on a basic level.
Sure. Thank you. And our final one.
So my speaker was Laser Wolf, and I have his permission. And he said that under normal circumstances, he would probably say that text is a written material. But since he knew that I am the one listening, he said that he would expect me to object to that since I deal with arts. So thinking about my position, he would elaborate and come to the conclusion that text is actually a stimulus. And more specifically, it's not any stimulus, but it's a stimulus that is making an argument that the person that is perceiving it has to respond to. So therefore, it is also a shared thing, and also a interaction in a classroom would be an example of that.
I couldn't have set this up better. Thank you. Thank you. I saw you smile. Text, yes. So often we think of it as a written word, which of course it is. But certainly, I heard that in the U.S., the National Council of Teachers of English shared this beautiful paragraph that I will email to you. But they say, in short, that a text is a unit from which meaning can be extracted. They say it can be written, it can be visual, it can be auditory. They say it can be a walk in the park. Right? So as we think about creating our curricula, it might be useful for us to think about expanding our vision of text. And say, well, can text be, well, I haven't written word, but have I thought about it in terms of something auditory? Have I thought about it as something visual? That's why you might notice in the prep pack I sent you, we use something which comes out of my own research, what I just call RBLs, right? And so when we're talking about, because I grew up with, required reading, recommended reading, right? And, but as we moved into this highly globalized, highly technological age, we know that people are really connected in other ways. And so we might consider RBLs, which is, of course, that's the reading. So required pieces which are reading, visual, and listening, RBL. Right? So what's required reading? What's required viewing? What's required listening? What's my required viewing? What's my recommended viewing? What's my required listening, my recommended listening? As well as the reading. Reading, viewing, listening. So that might help us think, maybe I'll use a visual. So now we're going to ask you, as we wrap up, to make meaning about how one might use a clip in a classroom. So I'm going to share with you a visual clip. It's short, and it's something that could have been used earlier or maybe later. And I want you to think about how a clip might be used in a classroom. So we're going to have show the clip, and then we're going to have you change roles. The former viewer and the former listener and the former speaker. And that will be it for us today.
Je m'appelle Catherine, j'ai 3 enfants. C'est un jour d'hiver, je suis des choses en et ma vie est inspirante.
Dis-moi ce qui se passe! Où est l'âge, toi? Il a fait quoi, il y a quoi?
Comment ça, je comprends? Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
Il m'a appelé, il m'a demandé de regarder la fille qui sortait de sa boutique là, de l'autre côté du boulevard.
C'est elle qui a entraîné votre fils.
Le 20 janvier, à 21h53, Ilan reçoit un coup de fil de la femme. Et après, on n'a plus aucun signal.
Qui aurait pu croire qu'une chose pareille pouvait arriver à Paris en 2006. Et pourtant, tout est vrai. Bien trop vrai.
On veut 450 et on les fait tout de suite.
La peine vient d'Afrique, c'est quoi ce bordel? Je veux pas là, Ilan.
Qui dit ce qu'on fait?
Il faut trouver l'argent, c'est un faux.
Il ne faut pas tomber dans ce piège-là. C'est seulement pour faire peur.
On peut juste regarder des stripants.
Non, madame, en France, on ne paye pas, c'est un principe, sinon on aurait des enlèvements tous les jours, vous comprenez?
Allô?
Ok, c'est bon, c'est à 06 depuis pas.
Qui là-bas? Personne. Quoi? Il a jamais été deux fois dans le même cyber. Je peux pas le faire, ton bordel.
À chaque fois que je te demande de raccrocher, tu raccroches. À chaque fois, c'est Ilan qui souffre un peu plus. Je le sais, ça, je le sens.
Ils savent ce qu'ils font.
Non, ils savent pas ce qu'ils font. Il y a écrit un juif a été enlevé, il n'y a pas écrit un homme a été enlevé. Ils vont tuer. Je vous assure qu'ils vont tuer. Il faut les croire, il faut faire tout ce qu'ils disent.
Tais-toi. Depuis le début, vous avez compris. Pourquoi vous avez peur de la vérité?
Okay, so thank you. I'd like to, let's pick this up then. So I'd like to ask the new speaker to think about how you might use a clip. See, that didn't take much time. How you might use a clip such as this in your curriculum, in your classroom, in a lesson, or in any way on your syllabus. How might you use this short clip, not film, this short clip? How might you make use of this in your curriculum? So the new speaker, please go into this.
I'll just say, before I show the clip, I would ask them if they know or think they know about anti-Semitism. And what would
I guess jobs now that revise, how do you in your
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, group. So let's just hear, check in with your partner to see if you have permission. And let's get a couple people to share out after you check in with your partner. Okay, great. So, Laser Wolf and okay, great. All right, so let's all attend. Go ahead, please.
I have permission from my from the speaker.
And who is your speaker? Jitka. Okay.
I'm still having trouble with pronouncing all these names correctly, but as time goes by, I will get. I've asked you to do Laser Wolf. I shouldn't be doing it. But she mentioned that she's not a fan of short.
Let's have group process in place. So you're just reporting out what she's
I'm reporting. She was not a fan of the short clips, and so right in front of me, she was trying to solve it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's have group process in place. We're wrapping up. This is our last report out. So if we can just all honor the speaker.
So she tried to solve that problem right, on the spot, because she doesn't like short reads. But she said that, given that that was what was necessary, she thinks that she would start out by showing this at the beginning of a classroom and have students look at it. And she would then have students watch it, and then the students would have to say what it was. They would have to discuss what it was about the thing that had trigger points for them. What were the trigger points, the things that really stimulated them, and what did it make them think, and what do they think the main points were, and what did they want to discuss. And then they would discuss that as a group, right? What all the different points were. And she would say it was very important that she would push each of these points to whatever depth she could get from that discussion. So not just people mentioning it, but what was the meaning for you and how far it went. And she would push the discussion on each of the points that came up to its deepest level. And then she would re-show the clip before the end of the class and ask people to notice and report out how their opinion had changed due to the discussion that took place in class. And the pedagogical goal would be to illustrate how powerful an academic discussion can be and how you respond to a stimulus.
Thank you. Thank you. Seth.
Okay, speaking with Rohi.
And please project your voice because you're a little bit back there.
All right, this is with Rohi's permission. She would use this clip in a class to engage with identity politics, perhaps. The idea of who's a victim and who's a perpetrator, and specifically to underscore the idea of whose perspective is driving a narrative. And most importantly, to look at second most importantly, to look at different meanings of perpetrator and persecution in various stages, how it can develop. And finally, and most importantly, for anti-Semitism, the layered meaning of anti-Semitism and terrorism today.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I want to thank everyone for making the session work. So I invite you not to worry about this now because I'm going to leave this up, I think, during our time. Since we're co-developers of the curriculum, I'm going to ask you, please, at your leisure, just write on a Post-it, basically respond to this. Please provide more of this, less of this, or please provide different of this, okay? And just at any time, give, and this is directly for me with the curriculum piece. It's not for the whole of ISGAP. You have a chance to provide an evaluation at the end for all of us anyway, for each session. But, so this is for me, for you, for next time. And so,
one task I would leave you with is that when we mix, either while having our break or over dinner, please try to talk more intentionally now about your curriculum with other people. Think, would this be a person I could work with as I develop my curriculum over the course of the week? Maybe because of my discipline, or because I want to bring in an aspect which I don't know much of. Maybe I want to bring in more psychology, I want to bring in more sociology, more theater, right? And so you can make it interdisciplinary, because that's one of the goals of ISGAP as well. So apples don't have to stay with apples, okay? So think about that. There's no limit to how many people you work with. You know, you might want to work with 2, 3, 4, however you wish, right?